just used to this. It's
Well, thank you for being
tech world.
that's so considerate.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Be
Yeah.
right back.
Ariel, you been flying at all?
Here and there, it all depends. Yeah. But I took the course on like how to actually do it professionally. So I'm just kind of like getting my bearings. But like I was just at my cousin's house. So she has her like two little kids, and like I flew over their pool and stuff. It was pretty fun. And on a hot day, it makes for a very good like natural air conditioning when you put the drone right above your head. So
Yeah, I bet.
fun.
Cool. So you have, I guess you have your license. Are you in training for it still, or?
I still have to like get it, but yeah. But the thing is, it's like it's pretty easy and self-explanatory to fly.
Yeah.
It's just like the up, down, forward, back, this, and then like all the tech. And like I'm a big gamer, so once you're used to that, you can just fly it no problem.
It's kind of like taking a regular driver's test to get your, motor vehicle license.
Yeah, except it's a written. Oh yeah, they do that too. Then it's like written too, so I have to like study up on some of those things, but it shouldn't be too complicated.
Yeah,
to be fairly easy. Yeah. Are you still doing the TaskRabbit stuff?
Yeah. I've been working out very well for me. I stumbled onto something pretty good, and TaskRabbit. I've been between that, and I'm like developing like my own cash customers and stuff. Like we don't even go through the apps, and I've had some people recommend me to their friends or brother or sister that needs something. So I'm starting to pretty much every day just about. I have like a full day of work, and it's just nice. I have no boss.
Because I noticed it last night. I'm like, that's not bad. I'm like,
so yeah, it's all new for me, and I feel good.
Nice.
Then you're full.
Well, these things are going good there.
Yeah, while we're waiting for Shale to get back to us, Geoff and Matthew, how much time do you have with us today?
I'm good. I mean, it's first thing in the morning here, so I don't have anything for a couple of hours.
All right.
That's about how long our show usually goes, about 2 hours.
About 2, yeah.
And we also have the ability to put some information for people to be able to contact you. So if you want to type into the group chat, like your social media or something like that, we'll put that into the stream information later.
Yeah, absolutely, can do. We might as well do that now. Jeremy, I have to ask, where did you get that knowledge of Te Reo Māori from?
Google Translate.
Well done. That was impressive. Google Translate's clearly getting a lot better.
Yes, but I think I only did one word though too. I wasn't trying to spell out a sentence because I figured if I did a sentence, I'd be like, he might catch on that I'm not a native speaker.
The interesting thing was that like there was a Dutch town called Zeeland, and that's why they call the country New Zealand.
That's right.
New one.
Yeah.
Kind of like
because we were discovered by a Dutch explorer called Abel Tasman. Of course, that's discovered in an Anglo-centric, a Eurocentric view of the world. The Māori people were here about 1,000 years before that. So
right, exactly. It's funny how we say like the East and the West, but if you go east of California, if you go west of California where I live, you hit China. So China is west of California. Because the world is round.
The political construct. Just to help us understand things.
Like if you hold like a ball in your hand, it's like it goes all the way west and all the way east. It's like depending on where you started from. But I guess if you start from Europe, I get it. But if you just start from like a random location,
Yeah.
go in like
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, any directions. Yeah, funny. It's a Eurocentric view of the world.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have some maps down here in New Zealand which put things, which show things upside down, because why does Europe have to be to the top of the map? Why can't we be at the top of the map?
Right.
I'm putting my social media, but I'll also put our party's social media on there.
How many parties are in New Zealand?
Well, in Parliament, there's 5. So we're the largest party outside Parliament at the moment. Obviously, that's our goal, is to get in there.
I see.
Cool. All
And
right.
I heard that the place is called the Beehive.
Yeah, that's
Hey.
right.
Yeah. The
Oh,
hive, the hive.
hello. Sorry,
Right.
I was on a different call, so I'm a little late. So anyway, glad to be here though.
Oh, you're
Good
right on
Faye.
time.
I say.
Hi.
Hey.
All right.
Continue. I'm catching up with like what you guys are talking about before I can actually really comment, right? So.
We're just
Yeah,
I
talking
think they're
about-
still trying to get the stream going. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
start, but we're just all kind of bullshitting.
Right. Yeah,
So-
we're gonna have to
Oh,
do
we
a
haven't
post.
started. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Geoff and
Oh, you're
Matthew are, Zach is also in Texas with me, I believe.
Yes.
What part of Texas are you in, Zach? Is it Austin?
Austin. Yeah.
Oh,
And,
Austin,
You're,
beautiful.
And
closer
Faye
to Dallas.
is more of a nomad, but she is nomadically in my town for a minute to visit me. So
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. She
A
was in.
digital. Are you a digital nomad, Faye?
I guess you could say that, but more like physically, I'm traveling to make sure I can check in on my friends and family, and also I get to be an activist and see things on a ground level and kind of report on what I see, so that we can find real actionable solutions to the actual problems we're facing.
Yeah, it's amazing like how much of U.S. politics is just theater. It's all just this nonsense just to like get people's emotions all riled up, and nothing ever gets accomplished. It's infuriating. It's just like, yeah, it's like that. Other countries are a little more efficient, although I think they do have
Faye,
stuff like that.
other Faye is asking if we're ready to start. Do we have everything we need?
Let's kick the mule.
I believe the recording is on. We decided we're going to record this episode and just stream it later because the stream is not working properly at the moment.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, Shale, you want to do the intro?
Sure. Welcome to the Yang Gang Roundtable. It is Sunday, October 11th, 4:16 p.m., and we have with us 2 of the leaders of New Zealand's Opportunities Party. Okay, thank you. Good, that was it. So it's very nice to meet you both. We are a basic income advocacy podcast. I don't know very much about you. Jeremy, one of our producers, booked you guys, so please introduce yourselves.
Kia ora koutou. My name is Geoff Simmons. I'm the leader of TOP. And Matthew, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, kia ora koutou. I'm Matthew Pottinger, and I'm the spokesperson for the UBI policy that we've got.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'm glad to hear that you are pro UBI. So that's good to get out of the way.
Absolutely. That is, one of our central platforms, and we are the first party in New Zealand to push for a UBI.
It's fantastic.
So, as I understand it, Geoff, you're an economist, and that's how you got into this?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm an economist. So yeah, I've been an economist for about 20 years, and of course, I mean, here in New Zealand we have a welfare system, but it is a targeted welfare system. So the debate in New Zealand has traditionally been with from the left talking about having a more generous but still targeted welfare system, and from the right, they've generally talked about having a less generous welfare system. And no one has really talked about the big issue of the clawbacks, you know, those abatement rates which trap people in poverty. So we have that, you know, that's a massive issue here in New Zealand, is that when people work, and increasingly so, given, as you guys all know, we're entering this gig economy, as they work, they lose the benefit and they have to pay tax at the same time. And so a lot of people are actually no better off, particularly if they're doing, you know, part-time work. So that's really why we started pushing the UBI to overcome what we call that poverty trap or the welfare trap. So that's kind of how I came into it. Matthew, do you want to tell your story?
Well, I'm a mechatronics engineer with a small business based here in Nelson, and I make a high-tech product that we export overseas. I kind of got into this somewhat through another issue that we have in New Zealand, where we have some of the most unaffordable housing in the world now. And as part of that, it's driven by our tax system. And so Top's proposal is to plug that hole in our tax system. But there's a big differential between taxes on other stuff and taxes on property. And if we plug that, then we've got to redistribute that revenue somehow. And we're proposing to do that through the UBI, and the UBI, of course, is a very effective way of doing that if you compare it to tax cuts, which only favour those on high incomes. A UBI basically targets those tax cuts, if you will, to those on lower incomes.
Absolutely. We're going through so many of the same things here. So go on, Jeremy.
Oh, I say I actually caught wind of Top through your guys' advertising campaign talking about the housing and property tax situation in New Zealand. I know it's kind of a core thing of your organization as well. Could you explain what the housing situation is in New Zealand and how property taxes work?
Yeah, so we actually have the lowest taxes on property in the world. And so as a result, New Zealand has this really perverse tax system where we have the biggest incentive compared to, you know, if you invest in businesses, that sort of stuff, you get taxed much like you do in America, but if you invest in property, you don't. So what we see is that New Zealand invests more in property than any other country in the world. As a percentage of our assets. And so we kind of have this economy which is based on getting rich by buying houses off each other. and that kind of worked for a generation for the boomers, but now the millennials are trying to get into this market, and it's just completely unaffordable. We have literally the most unaffordable housing in the world when you compare it to our incomes. We're not quite as productive as the United States. So we have lower incomes, but we have our house prices and rents are higher than yours. So you can imagine kind of the choking effect that has on not only in terms of poverty, but also on our economy when everyone's trying to spend so much money just to keep a roof above their heads.
Yeah, we have a similar situation here in the United States.
It's remarkable how similar.
Yeah, there's literally nowhere in this country where working minimum wage full time can pay the rent of anywhere. So what's the going rate for like a 2-bedroom apartment in New Zealand?
Well, here in Wellington, a 2-bedroom apartment would be around about, we're talking $600 or $650 a week. Now, our dollar is worth a bit less than in the United States, but we earn less than you do in the United States. So you could compare that pretty much dollar for dollar in terms of cost of living. Yeah, about $650 a week for a 2-bedroom apartment. So that's what you guys, because you guys tend to operate per month, right? So
Correct.
That's, yeah, $1,800, $1,900 a month in rent for a 2-bedroom apartment.
That's
Another-
the
right?
national
Oh, no.
average?
Hang on. That's sorry, it's more than that. It would be about two and a half grand per month.
This is the national average or the national mean, or?
Well, this is in Wellington where I am,
Okay,
so
Wellington.
that's slightly above the national. But there are worse places than Wellington, believe it or not. Auckland is probably the worst. Yeah.
What a good
I didn't mean to
metric.
cut you off, but I do want to ask, is there a stark rural-urban divide in the housing market like we have here in America? There is such a dramatic difference. It's not affordable on a minimum wage income to pay for rent anywhere, which is hilarious because what's minimum wage then? But the difference in between urban and rural is an order of magnitude in addition to that. So is it like that in New Zealand as well?
Yeah, it is. However, because of that stark urban-rural divide, in the last few years, a lot of people have been selling up in the cities and moving to rural areas. So rural areas are now catching up.
Yeah, here too.
Yeah.
So
I think
funny, the same thing.
I think Matthew was about to give a comparison on rents in terms of cost.
Yeah, well, if we look at house prices back in 1990 in New Zealand, which was 30 years ago now, our median house price to our median household income was 3, and that's deemed affordable. And we've been slowly growing to the point now the median house price is 7 times the median household income. And this is severely unaffordable. The definition is anything over 5 is severely unaffordable, and we're up at 7 across the country. And the thing too is now we're the first country who all our major centres, so we've got about 7 to 8 major centres, all of them have a ratio of over 5.1. So it's not really something you can escape at this point.
So what are your guys' solutions that you're looking for right now to handle these kind of things? Like, what is your strategy if you have any?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, our 2 big solutions work hand in hand. The UBI is, as Matthew said, is kind of the redistributive aspect of this. This is how we want to fix our welfare system and try to reduce reduce those high rates of poverty, which we've seen as a result of high house prices and high rents. We've had growing child poverty in New Zealand for the last 30 years. And it really is, it's even more stark than in the United States, because over there, over where you guys are, it's actually been incomes as well, right? Like your productivity's grown, but the poor haven't seen their share of it. But here in New Zealand, the poor have actually seen their share of productivity growth. So it's been, in terms of the increase in poverty here, it's been 80% of it has been due to housing rather than the rich taking a greater share of incomes. It's been the rich taking a greater share of incomes through the back door of renting out property.
So the only reason they're rich is their house.
Sorry?
The only reason they're rich is essentially because they figured out the housing.
Yes. I mean, that's how most people in New Zealand have gotten wealthy, is by investing in property 20 years ago, and all the money that they make, they continue to invest in more property and more property. So it really is a game of Monopoly. That's the New Zealand economy. So
the New Zealand dollar, right, is about it's about 3 New Zealand dollars for each 2 of the US dollar. So
yeah.
It's about, so the prices, for our listeners, they can try to translate that. But the interesting thing that you're talking about is really that it's not about housing. Housing sounds like housing, but real estate isn't about housing anymore. Real estate is really about where can the rich put their wealth? They no longer have a place. What can you do? Buy a very, very expensive painting? If you have this much wealth and it's just sitting in, what do you do with it? And so most people are going to try to buy real estate. And once all the wealthy people are just buying real estate, If you're just buying real estate as a place to park your wealth, then of course, poor people will never be able to afford to compete with that and will not be able to get into the homes as a place to just simply live. And that's two different issues that are being sort of, you know, pushed into one. People shouldn't be speculating on, you know, just locations for people to actually have a life. So how is your solution going to help?
I'll let you handle this, Matthew.
So if for the last 30 years in New Zealand, each and every year, our house prices and our rents have risen faster than incomes. So if you're a renter, every year your living standard is just dropping further and further because your income's not rising as fast as rents. So we need to flip that on its head, and our proposal is to flatline house prices. So hold them stable so that our incomes can catch up. We can't really cope with a sudden drop in house prices in New Zealand because we've been doing it for 30 years, because we've built our economy on it. We've got all our business capital tied up with housing, you know, in terms of business loans being backed by property. So we're all just about stabilizing house prices. Our incomes can catch up, and, you know, in 12 years we've modeled we can get back to a point where we're outside that severely unaffordable range, and then another decade or so we can get back to where we were in the 1990s. So that requires us just to fix the market here. We've got a distorted demand, so that is the tax system to a large extent. All our government policies kind of exist to make home ownership far more attractive than renting, far more attractive place to put your money. And then on the supply side, we've got all these restrictions that in part have been driven by the fact that property is the best investment. So we've got a lot of restrictions in what we can build, where we've got very expensive building materials, and we've got a sort of a system where to build more houses, we need our local authorities to have more money to spend on infrastructure, but the incentives are back to front. So if we just fix all those 6 things, and there's another one that Geoff can talk about too with what we're doing right now post-COVID, quantitative easing. If we fix all that stuff.
Yeah, we've only just imported the US concept of quantitative easing. We haven't needed
you're
it
welcome
up
for
until
that
now.
one.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
It's honestly it's a nightmare, because we're currently in the middle of the deepest recession we've seen, at least since the global financial crisis, and probably since the Great Depression. And, you know, because of COVID, and incredibly, house prices are now rising again. And this is because the Reserve Bank has publicly stated that it's too risky to let house prices fall. And that's why they have started quantitative easing. And,
oh boy.
And so just like happened in the United States, we're now seeing asset prices, so that's you know, the share market and house prices reach new highs. Now, because of the tax system that Matthew's already talked about, it is hitting our property market more than it's hitting our share market, which I think in the United States, the share market was what really boomed along with quantitative easing. So it's a bit different here, but it's the same basic story, that it's just pumping up asset prices even more.
I would like to just make a suggestion. I don't know. Talk for a second. There we go. So I met a woman who decided to do like a community center out of a second house that she has, right? And so she was actually helping other people, you know, social distancing still, but like, you know, they're doing yoga, they're renting an office space, blah, blah, blah. So like this housing thing has more of a life to it, right? But it's not her main home. And so like, I think we need to be able to incentivize people who do have homes to use it in a more ethical way, right? Providing resources to those who don't have it, you know, and like somehow encouraging them to take on the torch of like, you know, I don't reward them somehow, because, you know, they always want a pat on the back somehow. But like, we really honestly need to do something about incentives for buying housing. sure, it's great for your pocketbook, but you're killing your society. Why don't you use what you have for resources and donate it to somebody who might even turn it into something better? Like, I think we need more of that, but that's just my own personal opinion. But anyway,
on that, our tax system in New Zealand sort of encourages hoarding rather than utilization. So we have all these houses, we'll have a huge 5-bedroom house, but only a couple of people living in it. We'll also have empty homes because, again, there's really not a lot of incentive to use that asset because it's the capital gain that you're looking for. If you're going to put some tenants in it, you just end up paying a lot of tax on that return. So property tax is all about increasing the incentives, increasing more utilization of our houses.
So in Taiwan, we have a very interesting situation where people do speculate on the homes, and they have driven up the housing prices in terms of just real estate prices are very, very high. So ownership prices are very high in Taiwan, but the rent remains fairly low because there just aren't enough people to inhabit that many homes. They have a glut of homes in many places, maybe not in the big city like the Taipei or things like that, but there's kind of a recognition that renters are just not going to be able to afford anything higher. And so people tend not to really raise the rent, and they just, the rents are lower than in the United States by quite a bit. And so I find that really interesting situation where ownership is is still sought after. People want to put their money somewhere, but they don't see it as a way to, as a time to gouge people, because people will just leave if, they try to raise the rent and go to some other landlord. I wonder, I've always felt like there's something different about the regulatory practices of Taiwan and the United States that encourages this. And I wonder, how, where New Zealand falls on it. In the United States, for example, you get a lot of tax breaks for the ownership of your very first home. And you also get tax breaks for owning a property that you call a business property. So for a business property, any improvements you make and things like that, maintenance, things like that, can be considered a business loss. And so I wonder if, what types of tax, how can we encourage more, utilization, like you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds very similar in New Zealand. We had massive incentives for property ownership in the past, and the current government has kind of stepped those back a little bit, so that they are kind of making slow progress on a number of these issues, but the crisis is so bad and is so out of control that we need a lot bolder action. And I have to admit, we haven't looked much at Taiwan. I have looked at some of the approaches they take in places like Korea and in Northern Europe about these sorts of issues, and all of these problems are absolutely solvable. Other countries have resolved all of these things. We just need the political will to make the changes required. I have to say, while we're talking about Taiwan, I am really fascinated with what they've been doing with sort of devolved governance and making a lot more use of online tools to get people engaged in democracy. I think what they've done there is pretty fantastic, and I'd like to learn a lot more about that.
I think sometimes the problem is like a labeling problem. If we just call like UBI quantitative easing for the people, because I always make the argument that, like, when we had the 2008 bailouts, I don't know, did New Zealand have anything similar to the bailout that the US had, or like were companies like going under and needed to be funded by governments and stuff?
Yeah, we had bailouts in 2008, but they weren't the same scale as yours. That's why we've only just started quantitative easing now. And yeah, it's fascinating what you say, because we have actually since New Zealand started quantitative easing, we have been talking about it as quantitative easing for the people. So that's great to hear that you guys.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Andrew
that's great to hear that you guys are using that line too, because we just kind of.
This is the first I think it's been used. I think Ariel just kind of coined it for us.
But
there you go.
Yeah, like my mind is pretty creative, so it just goes all over the place. But it's cool it had a match with you guys. That's great. That's why I love New Zealand. But anyway, we call it the freedom dividend. But like my argument is this, right? What ticks people off, right? The minute they think about UBI, it's like, oh, it's unearned and it's coming out of me. But when we had the bailouts for the banks and all that money just being printed and just given to the corporations, they don't bat an eye. They don't say like, oh, these lazy corporations, getting my tax dollars. But with people, they do. So if we can flip that, it's like when the rich and the corporations are in dire straits, we just, like, the government automatically comes to their rescue. But for the individuals who, mind you, we did not speculate on this money, we have nothing to do with this policy, and when bad decisions in policy and speculation completely ruin people's lives and they lay them off, it's the person's fault. We got to change that entire narrative from start to finish,
Yeah, it's I totally agree with you, and we have obviously we looked really closely at that narrative around the Yang campaign. Freedom as a concept doesn't quite have the same power in New Zealand as it does in the United States, but we have. Matthew has been playing around with different framings here in New Zealand, and definitely that concept of a dividend as opposed to an income does really resonate with a big group of people, particularly on the right, because as you say, a basic income is kind of seen as unearned. Do you want to jump in there, Matthew?
Yeah, so what we've been playing around with is calling it Kiwi dividend. Now, Kiwi is, if you're not familiar, what the sort of colloquial name that we give New Zealanders, Kiwis, and it's based on our native bird here. And we've got things like our, everything in New Zealand's named after Kiwi, whether it's Kiwi Bank or, I can't think of any other examples, but
Kiwi Rail.
Sort of Kiwi Rail, Kiwi... Oh, Kiwi Build, that was a disaster though, unfortunately. We were supposed to build 100,000 houses in 10 years and it didn't happen. But if we park that to one side, we're calling it Kiwi dividend. And yeah, it's just based on that fact that as a dividend, it feels much more about it's your share of all the hard work you've been putting in. It's like a Christmas bonus, right? At the end of the year, you didn't do anything necessarily to earn that Christmas bonus other than working as one in the country, a team of 5 million working productively, and then at the end of the year you get this dividend. Seems to be working a lot better than having that word income.
Yeah, exactly. And in the United States, also Thomas Paine was for the citizen's income. So this goes all the way back to our founding. He said nobody created like the ground that you're standing on, right? Nobody made that. It was just there. The earth was just there and it didn't really belong to anyone. So anyone who claims that this piece of land is mine, then they owe us, our loss of access to that. Because back in, caveman times, everyone was just kind of roaming free until they come up with the private property. And then private property can take water, it can take like trees, it can take like different pieces of land. So it's like, hey, if you're going to take this and say, okay, this is mine. Okay, we live in a civilization, that makes sense. but you owe to the rest of the people because land is just there. It's not really anyone's to take. So then it's like a compensation for that. Have you thought of something or yeah?
Add something to this though. Like if you think about it, you buy up this land and you've restricted access to it when that property maybe needs somebody to be on it to tend it, to make sure that the plants are growing, that the trees are coming back, maybe you're harvesting, like, or whatever it is. But like we don't leave space for any nature to go inhabit that land or people to inhabit that land, and it's just like you're causing like climate issues, if you will, by restricting it to people who would love to tend to that nature. And it's all up for greed.
Absolutely. So in New Zealand, a bit of a history here. We claim, we've got an economist called Keith Rankin. I believe he was your professor at one point. Geoff, is that right? Keith Rankin?
Yes, he was, yeah. Yep.
And he, back in 1996 or just before that, coined the term universal basic income. That's sort of the history of it. I mean, there might be debate on whether or not that's fully true, but he wrote a paper titled for the first time Universal, that being the key word there, that differentiated it. And of course, since then it's taken on a life of its own. What's really interesting is that maybe about 20 years later, he doesn't refer to it as a universal basic income anymore. He calls it a public equity dividend for the very reasons that we've just been talking about. You know, for me, that shows that, you know, he felt like probably banging his head against a brick wall for many years, trying to get people to get on board with this universal basic income concept, and that he actually kind of found the most success by bringing it back to a dividend idea, bringing it back to the idea of that the payment is just your share of natural public equity resources, that sort of thing.
I like it.
That's really a good term.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And conservatives can get on board with it because if there's one thing conservatives hate, it's bureaucracy. And I'm not proud to say this. Back in 2015, I did think that Trump was going to like change things up and help out with things a bit. Turned out I was wrong. Okay, I can say that. But conservatives hate when there's like a large bureaucracy that's controlling everything and it's paternalistic and it's telling people what to do. And a UBI is the best of both worlds. It helps people and it doesn't get them in the molasses of big bureaucracy.
Yeah, it's quite ironic here in New Zealand. Probably the most support for a UBI has actually come from the right, because of that very reason. There's a number of retired politicians here in New Zealand who, since we announced our platform, have come out in support of the UBI because of that exact reason. So yeah, I mean, I think this is really the big challenge with this whole area. We're talking about a new way of running a country. We're talking about really big new ideas, and this narrative piece is probably the biggest area that's needed for innovation to get people on board. We're trying to come up with whole new social constructs here.
You know, like I saw this post the other day where they were doing, in one region, they're doing a UBI test, right? And like they're sending out $1,000 for 3 months to people in this area, and they posted it, and I'm like, doesn't that make it wish it was you that got selected or that was in your area? You know, we can make this happen. Like literally, like we're working on it, guys. Like, you know, and it's to get people in the mindset of like, it's not some lottery. This could be yours.
I call it like the big American refund or something like that. It's just that like the Wall Street and the government have been so inept, and useless for like so many years. And it's like they owe our generation for the crash, because we didn't start the crash. We had nothing to do with that. Like, we were all in university, or some of us, or even if you have just like a high school diploma, you could just get like a factory job back in the day. But it's like, we didn't cause this depression, recession, whatever the hell you want to call it, and you gave all the money to the people who caused it. And then when I frame it as a refund, some people catch on to that too, and they like it.
I had an older friend mention to me that he would be for the negative income tax, a universal negative income tax. And so my question to him was, how would that include caregivers or people who are disabled and are not able to work the same as an able-bodied person?
So what does that look
Zach,
like?
you had something?
Can you explain what the negative income tax looks like?
It's basically the universal basic income, except that first you'd have a tax, right? And then you would pay less of it, right? So the universal basic income would be given as just a tax back, which I don't agree with, because there's going to be people who need that money, despite not generating their own, income.
I have a lot of problems with the negative income tax structure as well, but there's a lot of different ways you can model it, and depending on how the IRS implements it, it would be seen differently.
Hi, Sheridan.
For example, hi, Faith. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, I've just been enjoying the wonderful conversation with these awesome New Zealanders, Geoff and Matthew, right?
Geoff is fine.
Oh,
just like JEFF in the States.
So sorry, Geoff and Matthew. Nice to meet you guys. Yes, I'm Sheridan. I'm also a basic income advocate. You can find me on Twitter at JSaberGamer. But the negative income tax structure that, for example, Howie Hawkins and Kamala Harris suggest, even though at varying rates, it is a monthly cash rebate. And it's to people who actually have a W-2 tax with an employer or are themselves a taxed entity. And the reason I have problems with this is because it forces the tax code onto every citizen, regardless of whether they actually want to know the code or even be involved with the details of taxation. Because you do have to be a taxable entity to actually get these rebates, even if you are qualified otherwise. A basic income is a little bit different, and it could be facilitated through our Social Security rather than through the IRS, which would account for every citizen that is born on American soil, rather than just those in the tax code.
Or even people who are in America with us, who are not necessarily citizens. That's been a possibility of opening that up. Zach, did you have something you wanted to add?
A comment and a question. I mean, the biggest thing with the negative income tax is you're essentially potentially incentivizing people not to work or to work less. You know, if your UBI disappears, if you start working more, I mean, you're kind of incentivizing people to work as little as possible. And we don't want to do that. But a question for either Mr. Simmons or Mr. Pottinger. Thank you very much for coming on today, by the way. I think, Mr. Simmons, you said that generally in New Zealand, it's people on the right who are supporting universal basic income, or whatever we want to call it. Is your party considered on the right, or are you on the left, more in the center? And I had a second question. You answer that one first, and I do have another one.
I mean, we're actually coincidentally, very, very similar in platform to Andrew Yang, trying to build a bridge between the left and the right. I mean, we actually ran the slogan "Not left, not right, but forward." That was in the last election, so that was about 3 years ago now. Nice. Yeah. So it's funny how these ideas you know, pop up independently. It's great to see. And
or possibly
like I
was
said,
swiped.
but we've totally been swiping a lot of the framing from Andrew Yang's campaign as well. You know, this is the whole thing. We're building a whole new narrative here, so it's great to pinch off each other. But yeah, so we see ourselves as we call ourselves you know, radically centrist. That we stand for the values that you know, central voters and politicians stand for, but we think
Make the
given all
most sense.
yeah, but given the challenges that are in front of us, we think we need real change to embody those values. So I guess, yeah, my comment about the right was, you know, New Zealand has, like I said, had this historical conversation where the left talk about a more generous but targeted welfare system, and the right talk about a less generous targeted welfare system. And so the UBI is quite a new paradigm, but it just so happens that there are a bunch of retired politicians on the right who've been thinking about these sorts of issues, thinking about the welfare clawbacks and abatement rates and that sort of stuff, and they just came out in support of this concept. They sort of said, yeah, we've been thinking about this stuff for years, and actually this UBI idea makes sense. So it was just an interesting coincidence, if you like, that most of the support from retired politicians came on the right.
Could you imagine what it would be like if we got all the different countries running on UBI and all the different head figures of each of these different countries to just like worldwide be like, hey guys, let's just wake up and collectively worldwide get a UBI, guys. Look how many people from all over the world want this, right? You're not the first person from outside of our country we've had on. We've had Canada and Kenya and the UK, you know, and I feel like I'm missing one. Well, now you guys, right? And so,
Yeah,
like,
I
we're
think
growing.
now that, like, because of the advent of like digital technology and the internet, it was only the elite class of countries that could go and like talk amongst other elite class because they had the money to travel across the world, and like but they were only like the super rich could only like cross borders and like talk to their fellow elites. But now that the common man has the power to speak across the world with their fellow common man, I think we can think. But the thing is that but we're economically kind of like strained. But the power that we have is that we can collectively come together through this medium and understand that a lot of these economic kind of like ideas and philosophies are just vestiges of the past when only the elite could like have these conversations. You know?
Well, because think about it. We used to have to pay for long distance phone calls even, right? And so now we have internet where we can stream video with people all over the world. All we got to do is figure out our timing, you know? But we're building networks right now, and we can actually talk to regular citizens on a personal level about issues that matter. And we never had that before, like you were saying. And like, but it's not just that. People who have the money have been tapping into other countries this whole time, right? They've been going outside of their own country and buying real estate or spending their American money in a different country. And so like all the money that's been generated in the origin location has been spent throughout the world. And we have never had access to even like access the rest of the world, if you will. And so by but we also limit how we get it. Like if you have a record, you know, and it's limiting you from going to a different country even, you know? And so it's like, how well can I dodge getting a record? So, you know, I'm going to hire this big, you know, lawyer to make sure I've got a clean record so that I can keep putting my tendrils in other countries, you know? And now we're waking up to the fact that this has been happening, you know, and on such a worldwide scale that we're all feeling the effects of it.
And I can't impress upon you enough what a difference Andrew Yang's campaign made here in New Zealand. It's kind of a bit sick, but ever since Trump took over in the US, a lot more New Zealanders have been watching American politics. It's kind of perverse, but that's the, you know, that's been the result over the last few years.
We elected the reality star, the reality show star, and so he's a lot more entertaining than all the other ones.
Are they watching in dismay or happiness or both?
Oh no, and it is largely in dismay, but
outrage.
Yeah, but as a positive side effect, because of all that, Andrew Yang is actually not hugely well known, but he is pretty well known here in New Zealand because people started taking an interest in American politics. When Andrew Yang came along, he actually did develop a bit of a following here. So his campaign has made an impact around the world. It's fantastic.
I feel like we should clip that, what you just said.
I love it.
Maybe
the Yang Gang should just like, maybe the Yang Gang should just like relocate to New Zealand. There's no COVID there, and hopefully we don't have it, and just like get a UBI there, and then come back to the United States or something.
We'd love to have you.
Zach, you had a follow-up question?
Oh yeah, I mean it's kind of changing the subject a little bit, or going back really to the property situation. I wanted to ask about the property situation and conservation, because I know in New Zealand, I mean I really don't know much about New Zealand, to be honest with you, but I always get these images of like beautiful land and mostly untapped, undeveloped land. Are people also buying undeveloped land, or is this just like speculating on houses purely?
No, it is. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Land prices have gone through the roof as well. They've really been following this trend, and this has led to, much like higher property prices has led to higher rents, higher land prices has led to more intensive land uses. So in the last couple of decades, we have seen a really big increase in particularly nitrogen pollution in some parts of the country where the land use intensity has risen, and as a result, you know, lots more fertilizers being used, a lot more animals on the land, and therefore a lot more nutrients leaking into our waterways. So that is a massive issue, and sadly that has gone hand in hand with that property speculation, and a lot of farmers saying, well, we need to farm this way because the land is so expensive that we've got to pay the bank to be able to pay the mortgage. And yeah, so again, that's another reason why we need to unravel this and start to, you know, bring land prices under a bit more control, so there's not that same pressure.
So Geoff, have you ever spoken with Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister? Like what's her view? Like what's she talking about? Has it ever came across her mind, this UBI idea, or what's going on there?
Oh yeah, I mean, so the Labour Party, which is what the party that Jacinda Ardern is is a leader of, has they actually ran in the last election on the platform. This was probably partly as a result of us putting pressure on the UBI issue, they ran on a platform of running a trial on for a UBI, but that never actually happened. And now we're in this COVID situation, and again, much like Ariel was talking about, there is this growing conversation about QE for the people, quantitative easing for the people, that sort of stuff. Different framings for UBI out there. Some people calling it helicopter money or all that sort of stuff. And our finance minister actually contradicted himself the other day when he said that he felt that now was the time to be conservative, that we couldn't take risks with new ideas like that. And then about 2 minutes later in the same interview, he said that things aren't bad enough to trial a UBI or helicopter payment. So this is just the nature of politics, you know, that these politicians like to signal that they're into these progressive ideas, but when they're actually at the helm, they tend to, because much like the United States, even though New Zealand's got a proportional representation system, we still have two big parties fighting for that centrist vote. And so we always, whenever they are in power, they tend to shift to the center and be a lot more conservative than they first appear. So, you know, that's I mean, Jacinda Ardern has you know, stood for some you know, some quite progressive ideals on the international stage, and she's certainly, you know, progressed the narrative here, but the actual progress on the ground from her administration hasn't really matched that rhetoric.
I wanted to mention something, which is that when I'm teaching, okay, I'm a private tutor, and I have students that are fairly young. They're teaching at the very, very beginning, a little bit of economics, you know, maybe in 4th grade. And they say, here's the definition of economics. It's how to, you know, apportion scarce resources, right? And so all of economics is built on this sort of, you know, notion that everything is scarce and human wants are unlimited. And so there must be some system for which we apportion all of these resources. But at this point, what we're dealing with really in a lot of situations is we have an abundance of food, we have an abundance of housing, and we don't know what to do with it in this situation. How is economics dealing with the new situation that we actually have an abundance of many of the things that humans actually need, but just some, you know, some are getting away with hoarding it or being forced to basically, you know, put their sort of own things that they don't even need. They just have to, you know, they keep collecting. Do we need like a new economics, a new science to deal with this new abundance?
Are you familiar, Faye, with a concept called donut economics? I think
no, I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, I think it's a United Kingdom concept. It's come out of the United Kingdom, and it's certainly making a big impression here. And the idea is that if you imagine a donut, you know, the inside of the donut is humans' basic needs that we need to provide enough of the basics to everyone, so that, you know, so that there isn't abject poverty, but also we need to limit our economy in terms of the outside of the donut is our planetary boundaries. So we can't have an economy that is so rampant that it destroys you know, kills the golden goose, if you like, or destroys the planet upon which we all depend. So the idea is that there is this sweet spot in the middle between providing for people's basic needs and not stuffing up the planet that we can flourish in. So instead of having this goal of limitless growth, that we should instead be looking for a balanced sweet spot.
So essentially, we need to figure out what is enough, what is the proper care and feeding of humans, and how do we implement that on a systematic level for everybody on this planet? Because otherwise, honestly, in my research, we have all the supplies possible that we need to find and meet the basic needs of taking care of humans and animals in the whole ecosystem. It's just we have the wrong people in charge. We don't have the right systems in place. We don't have the right teams together, and we don't have the right research to actually dictate what that is, right? We don't have enough money because the people in corporations are not investing their money in these platforms. They're not investing where the money needs to go, right? Because if you think about it, maybe this 1%, they just have a mental health issue of hoarding, right? That maybe they didn't get enough love from their parents, and so like something happened, and now the whole world's suffering from their suffering, and we can't keep going like this. If 99% of the world wants something different, then why are we listening to the 1%? There's a intensely ridiculous disproportion about where our resources are going, and we can't let these kind of things affect us like it is.
Yeah, I think a big issue in the United States and a growing issue here in New Zealand is the influence of money on politics. And obviously that's a massive issue over in the United States where lobbying is commonplace, but it is also a really growing issue here. Over the last 3 years, all three of our biggest political parties have been in court or under investigation for funding issues. And so yeah, we really do need to reform that system to get that kind of big money out of politics, and make sure that we're that it's actually politics is set up to benefit the people.
Yeah, for sure. I think the problem is when you privatize the gains and you socialize the losses. And how do we make sure that this corruption, I think the problem in the United States is that we've seen this. Our incumbency rate is like 94% or something like that. I don't know where it is in New Zealand when you have your elections, if the incumbent keeps winning over and over again. But the thing is the United States is humongous. So when there's a challenger or when there's a new face who wants to go into politics, it's not that, it's just that they just can't reach people in time to get enough people to vote for them, even though their ideas are great and will help, because the incumbent just has this gigantic war chest and they can drown them out with their money. But I'm thinking maybe somewhere, New Zealand is a much, much smaller country, and maybe it's easier for if a new face runs in politics for them to get in front of people fast enough so people can vote for them. I don't know.
You'd think so. You'd think so. And that's been such a topic for us, the Opportunities Party, over the last few years. So we've got in New Zealand this threshold of 5%, where to even get in the Parliament, you need to get more than 5%. And as one of our bigger parties, probably the fourth biggest party, or third or fourth biggest party, is actually struggling to meet that 5% threshold, just to give an indication of how high this thing is. And of course, it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because nobody votes for the party that's under 5% because, it might be a wasted vote, so I'm not going to vote for that party. And so you can never quite get past that point where, you've got a bit of momentum to get over.
Do you guys have ranked choice voting at all?
Sorry, Faye?
Ranked choice voting. Do you guys have that, or is that anywhere in your periphery?
Oh, it's definitely in the discussion. So New Zealand has moved to a proportional representation system, but we still have that 5% threshold, and ranked choice voting would absolutely make a massive difference to that particular issue, or just reducing the threshold down to sort of 3% or so would make it a lot more doable. But yeah, I mean, the other thing that Matthew didn't mention is, of course, we have a similar issue that Andrew Yang had in terms of media blackout, because the media don't bother covering anyone who's less than 5% because they figure they're not going to get in, so therefore you can't get that mainstream media coverage either. And this is despite the fact that the Opportunities Party we are #1 on YouTube in terms of reach. We're #3 on Facebook, behind the two major parties who are spending 10 times as much as we are in terms of boosting posts. And yet we're still only just third behind that second party who is spending incredible amounts of money. So social media has made a big difference there, and allows us to talk to people, and we are getting incredible results on social media. So there's clearly that demand for new ideas out there for some radical thinking, but getting that mainstream media coverage is a massive challenge, and the hard part for us is motivating our base to actually vote when they are so cynical about the system and the influence of money upon it that they just think nothing's ever going to change. So there's some real challenges there.
Hey guys, I have to step away here pretty soon, but I would like to ask one question real quick. Just in relation to what your UBI policy is, what you guys are proposing. So who would qualify for it? How much would they receive? How often would they receive it? And what form would it be issued?
Yeah. So our UBI policy is $250 a week for everyone 18 to 65. The reason we stop it at 65 is because, believe it or not, we already have a UBI in New Zealand for those over 65, cash payment every week, and it doesn't get abated away if somebody works. So, you could see it in a different way. We're actually bringing that 65 age down. We're just extending this UBI right down to age 18. We've also got a child UBI of $40 per week per child. This gets paid weekly or fortnightly, straight to the bank account. We've sort of stipulated that everybody should have an individual bank account, just to keep that sort of individualization going on, where, if you're in a relationship with somebody and you need to leave for whatever reason, that the money's going into your account rather than a joint account.
So that's interesting. It like how money makes things corrupt, and how like it finds its way into all these things, and all the problem of like these elites kind of like being in bed with each other, and people with new bold ideas not getting any attention. It seems like that in like almost every country. So the thing is that we're gonna have to think of a big bold move to somehow get our faces out there and our thoughts out there and ideas. And I think maybe going into niche communities of like different people, whether it be like gamers or people who like sports or people who just like a hobby, because a lot of times hobbies require you to have extra cash on the side and not just think about your survival needs. If the worldwide UBI movement can somehow make it into those niches, because our ideas are great. The problem is our visibility. If we can solve this visibility problem and this people not knowing about us problem, we can solve a lot of problems.
I've always been excited to think, why don't we just infiltrate all these video games and put UBI messages or whatever, and just you know, maybe Minecraft, you create like a thing that tells you about it, and people who go to that server would see it and like, oh, what's this about, you know, or something like that. But like, we gotta move into a digital
I'm
world
just
that we
saying
can all meet in.
we got to move into a lot of, because it's great, because we all see the problem and what it is, and the thing is, we have great arguments. They're foolproof, but the only problem is that, like, who knows about us? So we have to solve for that problem, and like going into like niche communities or things like that, and kind of like finding a way to expound those ideas there, so people who never know about this even existing will know about it. And a lot of times I get good receptions once you crack that barrier, that, like, you know, the corporations got it, and like, you know, people live off of their inheritance, with like a relatively average person, it just seems to click. But the problem is that the visibility. That's it.
Question, if I could just jump in real quick. Before, I believe Mr. Pottinger said that it was $250 a week is your plan. That's roughly on an annual basis pretty similar to what Andrew Yang was proposing here. What percentage of the average...
Those are New Zealand dollars
income,
though, Zach, so it's a little less.
Right, but okay, that's true. But my question is really, what percentage of the average income in New Zealand is $13,000 a year?
Yeah, so it works out a pretty similar as Andrew Yang's proposal, because yes, New Zealand dollars are worth less, but our average income is less than the United States as well. And so it's actually, in terms of incomes, the New Zealand dollar, you know, our incomes in New Zealand dollars are about the same as US incomes in US dollars, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. So the average income is probably about like 55,000 there. I think that's the median.
Absolutely.
Here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in New Zealand dollars. So Andrew Yang's proposal is very similar. And like I said, we studied that quite a lot in terms of putting together our own proposal. Matthew might want to answer that question some more, Zach, but I just actually wanted to go back to the previous question, to the previous conversation around you know, getting greater exposure to these ideas. And I really wouldn't underestimate the power of Andrew Yang outside of the United States. You know, people have heard of him. People do follow US politics, and I think the impact that he made during that Democratic primary and since, in terms of the discussion around COVID, it has been noticed around the world. And I would say Andrew is the closest thing that we have to a celebrity in the UBI, you know, in the UBI conversation around the world. And, you know, I know he's doing a lot of work in the United States and is incredibly busy, no doubt, with all of that stuff. But if you want to get the UBI movement you know, happening around the world, then I really do think that getting Andrew out there more in other countries is the way to do that.
Also,
so you're saying we should get you in touch with him, is what I'm hearing.
Oh,
yes.
Look, I mean, we've interviewed Scott Santons, all that sort of stuff. We'd love to get, we'd love to be in touch with Andrew. I mean, that would be fantastic. But I'm just saying, going forward, if you guys are having these sorts of conversations about getting an international movement going, then actually I think you have the best asset there in the United States.
Well, also, the thing is, you guys have different kind of niches that you're much better at than we are, right? Maybe you know, if you steal the stereotypes just a little, you know, not the offensive ones, but like certain cultures have definitely hyper focused on certain things, maybe medicine, maybe money, maybe you know, whatever. And if we worked with people from different cultures with different strengths, imagine the power we would have. We should have something like this, but it's so corrupt, we don't trust it anymore, right? Like it does there needs to be something outside of it that it's a grassroots kind of level, you know? And like, I think if we had experts and other, you know, like maybe you guys are much better at digital media, or maybe you guys have more money. You know, this is you guys, any other country, okay? But like, then we could share our resources from other countries outside of our governments, because it's almost like all of the governments are corrupt. So it's like the people of the world need to rise up and just raise the bar of what we like expect from, you know, our leaders, and like just like stop with the corruption. Anyway, rant over.
Yeah. Hey guys, I real quick, I do have to step away. I just want to say thank you very much to Geoff and for Matthew for coming on today. I will follow up with you guys either later on this evening or tomorrow. But yeah, I'll leave you to continue the conversation with the roundtable. But once again, thank you to you both.
Thank you, Jeremy, for setting up the show.
Thanks for setting us up.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Going off of what Faye said, I think it's important that we share notes on what's effective. That's the most important. If something works in your area, it's like, this is how we introduce these people, and these are the arguments we used, and this is how we framed it, and this is how we did this and that, and these are the results we got. We just do that internationally, and we just build upon that.
So like the things that work for me, so I'm out on the street every weekend talking to strangers that go past. And the two things that work for me in the New Zealand context are to say, right, people who are receiving a benefit right now, because we have a fairly large, I guess, percentage of Kiwis who are receiving a government transfer of some description. If you're not in work, you're getting the job seeker allowance. If you're a student, you're getting student allowance. If you're a worker, but you're not earning so much, you get working for families. Now, these are all just benefits with a different name. So lots of people can sort of relate to them, saying that right now, if you're on the benefit, if you work, your benefit goes down. The moment I tell that to people, it clicks for them. They completely understand how backwards and irrational that is. And the example I use is that in New Zealand, if you're a sole parent working minimum wage, you will work for 2 days, 16 hours, and be no better off. In fact, each of those hours that you work, you actually lose 25 cents an hour. For me, that, you know, showing that example clicks for people to say, well, why are we taking this money off people when they work? You know, they're trying to further their financial situation, and they're in effect being punished for it. The other thing that resonates quite well in New Zealand is that we've got our minimum wage, and our minimum wage is relatively high compared to OECD countries. But we have this thing called the living wage, which is being calculated for how much somebody needs to earn to be able to pay their living costs. Now, this living wage has been driving up higher and higher over the last few years because of house prices and rents. And our UBI brings everybody on minimum wage up to living wage overnight. So this is quite effective because lots of our major parties are signaling that they want people to be earning a living wage. Now, it's not that easy to do because you've got to force that cost onto businesses. So people are sort of saying, well, okay, maybe this industry needs to do living wage, or how do we get there? And it's quite bold for us to be able to say at top that everybody goes from minimum wage to living wage overnight. It seems to have quite a good cut through that angle.
So this interesting, I found that on the Big Mac index is showing that the New Zealand dollar is a bit undervalued compared to what it should be, because your Big Mac costs slightly more in New Zealand dollars than it does in American dollars right now. But the interesting thing for me right now is the different currencies, right, actually make a difference, I think. For me, the universal basic income absolutely should be piloted by the United States, because the United States, you know, is the issuer of the United States dollar, which is sort of the de facto world currency, which gives it a special position in the world, one that is, it's almost we have this almost, we have the ability to issue as much money as possible, because not only are we providing money for ourselves, but we're providing money for exchange of very important vital things like resources like oil.
Specifically, the Fed in March said that our balance sheet has unlimited asset valuation for currency creation.
Yeah. We can create as much currency as we'd like, and so we're not likely to fail from any sort of trial where, as you know, once we start issuing money to the populace, we'll just see how things adjust, you know. Whereas I wonder if that's still a consideration for other countries, especially islands. And I mean, are you concerned that, you know, Aussies will all come over and try to take advantage of your program, or, you know, what do you are you concerned that it could be you know, a difficult thing for the country to afford?
Well, yeah, I mean, so in terms of the monetary policy, that quantitative easing side of things, I mean, that is an issue here. There's quite a big debate going on here in New Zealand about whether we can be innovative on monetary policy without getting punished by international markets. So absolutely, Faye, I mean, you are correct in that if anyone is if any country is in the best place to innovate on monetary policy and show some leadership, it would without doubt be the United States. So, but I don't think, you know, I guess it depends on your attitudes to risk. Personally, I see, looking at what's happened in the United States with quantitative easing, I think, yes, it would be risky for us to trial something like this, trial something like that here, a QE for the people kind of approach. But having looked at what's happened in the United States, I don't think it could be a whole lot worse, frankly, in terms of all of those impacts we've talked about with, you know, all of that money going into asset bubbles. So, so yeah, I really do 100% agree with what you're saying, but I think that that shouldn't necessarily stop other countries from innovating and trialing things altogether. In terms of paying for it, I mean, we actually worked out, this was pre-COVID, we actually worked out a plan to pay for the universal basic income so that we can actually pay for it through tax reform. So we think it is doable here, but of course, this whole COVID situation and the quantitative easing that is happening around the world does offer us an opportunity for making it even easier again.
I only bring that up because I have that concern sometimes when people are discussing about doing a universal basic income in a state of the United States. So a single state, say California or, you know, Montana, or a particular state, Nevada, trying to provide the universal basic income. States don't have the same powers of issuing money as our federal government. And so we would have trouble possibly with, you know, what may possibly happen if the budget is somehow overrun. But I think and also, I mean, people here move around quite a bit. If you move from Texas to California, then what happens to you? Or if you move from one state to another. So there's all these ideas about how to keep the money, you know, within your own, if you issue the money, how do you keep the money circulating in your state before it, you know, disappears to Amazon or something like that. So so I wondered if that was also an issue for smaller countries. For definitely, I feel like it's the right place to do it is at the federal level in the United States. But we were always hoping that if it ever happened here, you know, it would kind of spread like wildfire around the world. But it may be that New Zealand is going to have to try it out first. You know, it's going to have to be, if our politics continues to be just deadlock every time we get into, I mean, right now, I don't know if you're aware that right now, very the one part of the stimulus for our COVID-19 situation out here. We're on our second stimulus package or third stimulus package at this point. And the one thing that is considered the most popular, and both parties are, you know, going to be willing to vote on, is the cash for the people. And yet that's also what's holding it up, is they want to keep adding pork onto that. So they're unable to agree, because the other parts that are controversial, they're fighting back and forth on it. And so the cash never gets distributed. So I feel like popular opinion is really moved towards, you know, acceptance of simple cash for individuals.
Yeah, COVID has definitely shifted the debate along. A similar situation here in New Zealand, except that the government has been unable to resist the temptation to target everything in some way or another. So, you know, that has held things back a bit, but certainly COVID has created this a much greater understanding of how a UBI or what some people are calling helicopter money could really be used to kickstart the economy.
Have you guys issued any stimulus checks in New Zealand? Because we have. We were given, was it $1,200 per individual, and $500 per child, up to 3 children. That was the stimulus that was given, and everybody's awaiting eagerly their second check. You know, so.
Yeah, so our stimulus package was targeted to businesses that to help them keep people in employment. So if your business was affected by COVID, you could apply for a grant which helped you keep those jobs, you know, and it's really interesting because those stimulus checks are running out right as we speak. And so in the next few weeks, I mean, you know, quite cynically, the government, you know, timed that stimulus package to end around about the time of the election. And so we will see just after the election, we'll start to see the data coming through on how much of a difference that is making.
But no money was given specifically to individuals, just to businesses. And
No.
so one of the requirements of receiving that money would be that you keep all your workers.
Yes.
Is that right?
That's absolutely
in
correct.
our country,
yeah.
we did something very, very different, which is we gave out money to businesses with no stipulations whatsoever of keeping their employees. And so it's been pretty strange. And we also had the unemployment benefits, correct?
Hey, if I could clarify with what you were talking about, that first stimulus, there were really 2 major business loans. Was the large scale PPP and then the small business PPP. And the large scale business loans, honestly, both of them forgave all of your loans if you fulfilled a percentage of the expenses that you got from these loans on certain qualifying purchases, and it would count as a tax liability decrease. So some of these bigger businesses that already have infinite tax liability decrease didn't really need that. So they used a little bit more on stock buybacks and more financial instrumentation rather than keeping payroll, because they saw automation as being a cheaper thing than keeping people on payroll. Even though they were going to have a little bit of a tax liability from the loan, they were covered elsewhere. So the real people that had to follow these rules were small businesses that don't have that much tax liability easement.
And the worst part of it, the very worst part of it is that when the states individually, you know, the governors or whatever, decided that it was okay to go back to work, or they allowed the businesses to call back their workers, whether the workers didn't really have a choice in the matter. So if the small business said, come back to work, right, and you were called back, you lost your unemployment benefits immediately. So you were forced to go back to work, whether or not you felt that your own family or your, you know, whether your health was in danger. You didn't really have a choice over it.
Absolutely. Yeah, workers are very undervalued with this, with all these stimulus packages, because they are really only seen as labor to be put into a capital machine. And that's really a long-standing critique.
Yeah, it's really, sorry, Matthew, you go.
In New Zealand, just talking about COVID for a second, COVID has pushed the argument for UBI forward in two different ways. One, there's a huge amount of stigma for our unemployment benefits here in New Zealand. I'm not too sure what it's like in the States, but
it's pretty similar.
Yeah, it's such that we've had a large number of people, of course, who've lost their jobs and have never needed unemployment benefits before. And so they're looking around for alternatives now. You know, there is no stigma with a universal basic income, of course, because everybody gets it. So that's really, instead of just having a small percentage on unemployment benefits, where just nobody talks about it because it's so tiny. Now, with the increasing in unemployment, lots of people are like, is there anything better than this? You're telling me I have to go down to this office, tell them I'm poor, convince them that I'm worthy enough to get money, and then I've got to prove that I can't find work, all this sorts of stuff. So that's been useful in terms of pushing the argument for UBI forward. And the other one that's really interesting recently is that we've got a real issue with seasonal work here. We've got a big part of our economy is, you know, growing fruit, for example, and we need workers to pick that fruit. And right now it's sitting on the trees and nobody's picking it. Normally the people who would be picking it are workers that that have come from overseas to work low wages, etc. So we've got this bunch of people who are unemployed who could pick the fruit. But there's a bit of a standoff here, because the moment that these people pick the fruit, they lose their benefit. Or if they pick fruit for a few weeks and then stop, there's a stand down period where they won't get their unemployment benefit for 2 weeks. So there's just there's no incentive at all for these people to pick the fruit. So what we're proposing, in a way, just to try and move the conversation forward, is to say, well, if we can make all those benefits unconditional on income, then maybe we can illustrate how people with an incentive to work will work if they're not losing the benefit the moment they do. And the fruit, of course, on the trees it's like a ticking time bomb. I'm sort of sitting here waiting to see whether or not the government moves on this, because we've got the workers, but they get punished the moment they work, and then we've got the fruit that's rotting on the trees. So let's see.
And then you've probably got poor people who can't afford to buy the food, but they really would love to eat.
Exactly.
And the
Exactly.
universal basic income simply solves all of those problems so easily and with so little administration that it's just really hard to understand why we wouldn't do it.
Also, like, people like volunteering for stuff if they can meet their basic needs, you know, like if I can feed myself, yeah, sure, I got some extra time and I can make sure I feed my community. But if you don't have any of that, you know, you're kind of stuck in this it's almost
like it's so disgusting that this poverty trap puts people in this no man's land that punishes them for being useful to society. That is stupid beyond measure. And once we get over that, then we've really opened up our minds. We have such an archaic, idiotic, toxic system that we should all be embarrassed by. But unless somebody gets a bullhorn and goes into these politicians' ears and like screams their head off, we're going to be, I don't know how long we're going to be.
It never works though. If somebody's yelling, nobody's listening. That's the problem we have.
Just show them the evidence. The evidence. That was a perfect story, Matthew. That's it.
And we've got, you know, we talk about volunteering. Guess what age group volunteers the most in this country? If your guess is
65 and over,
65.
65, yeah, because they already have the money coming in no matter what. So they're like, hey, what have I got to lose? But then, you know,
My grandfather works more now that he's retired than when he was working at the paper mill. Okay. He does so much community service. He, in his little town, got crowned for like king of community service, you know. I mean, but he would also go to other countries and like build schools and churches and stuff. So like he's just been doing this forever, you know. Great inspiration, you know, like why don't more people do that? Oh yeah, because they can't afford to even like afford to go to a different country to help them out, you know, like let alone their own.
Well, it's the myth of laziness. It just keeps coming.
Yeah,
back.
it's just like stereotyping the worst in people, and using that. It's like, well, what do you think you're gonna get when you project the worst in people? You're gonna get that worst in people. But when you project the best in people, you're gonna see that best in people. So it's a self-perpetuating cycle that all started because of this trickle-down myth, or this pull yourself up over your bootstraps, and all of the other mythologies that some of these policymakers make.
We have really terrible traps for disabled here in the United States. I don't know if you have the same echoes over there, but in order to prove that you're disabled, you have to not do anything. And if you do anything, even work a day or two, or somebody reports you that oh, I saw her, she's able to do this, you're no longer disabled. And so you got to start the process over maybe, and it can take years and years with lawyers' help to help, you know, while you're doing this, living off of nothing because you can't work during the time that you're applying for disability. You know, it just takes so long to get disability. And then
some people die waiting.
Some people are, or they just can't handle the process, and they just end up homeless and despondent, and you know, no benefits whatsoever. So a lot of people who qualify for benefits never get them, and it's just it's so terrible to hear about. You know, I see my neighbors who are living in the low-income housing here. They have, you know, they say, well, we're living on the one income from my husband, who's also disabled, and I'm disabled, but I won't be getting anything until this process goes through. And it's just so much.
It's a waiting game.
And if I say, well, may I pay you to do something? They're like, no, we're not going to, you know, break that possibility, because we don't want to miss out on what they're going to be getting, only maybe $200 a month.
It's not worth the risk to them.
But it's $200 a month for perpetuity. So they have to continue this process. It's crazy.
Yeah, the issue with disabled here in New Zealand, I mean, it's similar, of course, absolutely. Whenever you have targeted welfare, there's hoops to jump through, and some people don't get what they're owed. You know, particularly people. The big issue here in New Zealand is people that whose reading and writing isn't very good, because there's lots of forms to fill out, and so we have huge numbers of charity organizations that offer help with the paperwork to get the benefit, which is, you know, is crazy unto itself. But the big issue in New Zealand, particularly with disabled people, it's actually it's more around the it's less of a problem for the severely disabled who really can't work. It's more of a problem for those that actually can work, particularly people with intermittent disabilities like mental health issues, because all of those stand down periods that Matthew talked about before, that if you are well and you want to work, you can work as long as you get over that welfare trap, of course, which we've talked about before. But you can go out and work and you can earn money, and that's fine. But it's more than if you have another episode of mental health issues or any other sort of temporary disability, that you then have to go through the whole rigmarole again, and there's stand down periods and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit like the gig economy, you know, like any situation where people are moving in and out of work, or have flexible working hours or anything like that here in New Zealand, a lot of people will just say, look, we're not going to bother with the benefit system, we'll just survive on whatever we have. And I mean, I know, so Matthew was talking about people who do seasonal work, and there are some people who managed to piece together bits of seasonal work all around, and they travel all around the country, piecing together bits of seasonal work right throughout the year. But for winter, doesn't matter what you're willing to do, there's no work in winter. So for 3 months of the year, they're living off what they've saved from the rest of the year because they just don't want to bother going into our benefit system and trying to get something to tide them over those few months, even though they're working bloody hard the rest of the year.
It sounds like our public school teachers around here.
Yeah, a lot of people around this. Izzy, I wish Izzy were here, because Izzy's, he talks about the poverty trap in those terms too. So many people in this country are in that same situation. So many of the things you're talking about are like looking into a terrible mirror. We both have the same problems. It's so frustrating, but at least we're not the only ones, right? I don't know.
Right. But yeah. I want to just pause for a second for all of this. We're talking about disabilities, but that's just a symptom. Like what is it a symptom of? It is people who've been in the workforce trying to do jobs that machinery would do safer, right? And we are banging up our bodies. Maybe you got like sliced and you're like, oh man, I don't have insurance. I'm not going to take care of that, right? It's like having a car that you're like, oh, that noise isn't good, but I'm going to keep driving. Okay. Well, if you don't have money for regular maintenance, you're going to run it into the ground. And that's what we've done with our bodies because we can't afford it, right? We can't afford to do the regular tune-ups and stuff. But then you top that on top, or like combine that with the fact that we have so much trauma, right? We have there's so much mental health issues, but what's the source of that? We have been traumatized by sex trafficking, by abusive relationships, by blah, blah, blah. It goes on, I don't need to explain this to you guys. I'm sure you figured some of this out, right? And the problem is though, we're dealing with symptoms and not the cancer, if you will. Like you gotta find it and remove it, and like that's the corruption. That's incentivizing the wrong things, and just like it's wrong. And we gotta step back and realize that like if we can stop focusing so much on like we should definitely take care of these people, right, while we figure out how to fix these systems, but we got to find the systems that are broken so we can fix them. And conversations like this starts that process.
I heard that Matthew say that he's a computer scientist. And so I'm wondering if your prior work also brought you to this in some way that, were you involved in automation or the creation of, expert systems and stuff that is used to sort of replace people?
Yeah, like my degree is in building robots. Sorry. So certainly when people talk about, the future of automation, I can kind of see in my head exactly what that looks like from the point of view of having developed stuff in that area. What also brought me here too was that I'm a small business owner and we kind of, sales fluctuate from year to year. So that doesn't fit well with the kind of government support we get. Like, with our current system, we all get payments, but I might get paid too much because I made a sale, and so then I've got to pay it all back. Just these really perverse things that effectively incentivize me to not work at all or to not make that sale, because if I did make that sale, I then have to pay this money back. So what am I doing in that space? One sort of thing that we're trying to do a lot of is that, like for our campaign here, I've put together a calculator, an online calculator where people can go on, enter in their income, and it spits out exactly how much better off they'll be. And then we're trying to encourage people to share that with their friends, trying to get some sort of, to get it to go viral to an extent. And I'm also looking to do a tool after this election where it would take the other side, it would focus on the welfare track. You get people to enter in their details and it would show them the welfare track that they're in. A lot of people don't realize they're in the welfare track right now. They don't realize that there is this scenario where a sole parent would lose 25 cents an hour. So I think just shining light on these things is the first step.
I'd also say that the really interesting thing that we got out of our conversation with Scott Santons over in the US is is just how big a deal automation is in the United States, and it's not that big an issue here in New Zealand as yet. I think we're kind of maybe 5 years behind in terms of that technology. And it was really interesting talking to Scott because, of course, you've got this massive problem over in the United States with retail just getting hammered by online. And actually, in New Zealand, it was COVID. It was the COVID lockdown that actually was the first time that that retail went backwards. You know, in real life, retail went backwards in New Zealand. And since then, there's been this shift. You know, there's been this permanent shift of about 15% that's gone from online's just gone like this, and offline has gone like that. You know, a 15% shift of sales from you know, high street retail to online retail, and we haven't seen that before in New Zealand. And we had people still building malls in New Zealand, you know, and I've been talking about this for a couple of years. Haven't you seen what's happening in the United States? These places are shutting down, and they're now, you know, just turning into wrecks. And yet here we've been still building them, but now people are going, oh my goodness, actually this online thing is real. This is coming. And so automation is just, thanks to COVID, is just starting to become a conversation here. So, you know, in some respects, we're a long way behind you guys.
Oh, don't worry. You won't be long behind us. The painful, scary truth of exponential automation, when capital is used to buy more capital, which is used to build more capital, it's going to be on your doorstep in the next year. Full automation like we're seeing here.
Hey guys, real quick, I got to get going. So
Yes.
just want to say it's been a joy today, and very nice meeting both of you, Matthew and Geoff. Best of luck with the top party, and maybe I'll see you in New Zealand someday.
Good as that. Yeah, stay in touch.
All right, take care. Bye-bye now.
Yes, in fact, we're coming up on our 2 hours right now, and I wanted to give everybody a chance to sign off, and also to you know, let us know a few things that they would like to be working on. They would like to, you know, go ahead and tell us about things that you would like us to maybe do in terms of helping you gain your seats in New Zealand.
Yeah, how can we help you?
Well, like I said, you know, I really do think, I mean, obviously, Andrew's a busy man, but I really do think that, that, you know, he is known down here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and, you know, we have our election in a week's time, so it may not be possible to set something up in that kind of time frame, but I really do encourage you to keep an eye to the future, and know that the yanggang is known around the world, and that you can have an impact by leveraging those international those international networks. I mean, there are networks like BN, you know, I forget what that stands for, the International Network of Basic Income, but you know, that those kinds of networks are a little bit nerdy and quite you know, they're quite policy oriented. They're not very accessible.
Cerebral.
Yeah, they're very cerebral. Yeah, and we need to reach people. We need to reach people's hearts. And as Ariel was talking about, we need to create whole new narratives to get this new vision of society across to people. So I really think, you know, the yanggang has really pushed things forward in that respect, and I encourage you to you know, keep connecting internationally, and so that we can all share.
Yeah. You know what? You just gave me an idea. One day, like, we'll invite the ones from England, the ones from Kenya, the ones from Canada, and like we can do like a whole thing. that would be awesome. Well, maybe we'll do a game or like a quiz or like a, you know, whatever. Yeah.
That would be fantastic. But even simpler than that, or perhaps in addition, before we do that, Geoff, Andrew Yang does come to some semi-regular recurring video chats that some people who come to this podcast regularly are on. So why don't we invite you to one of those humanity hangs, and then you can be on there and say, I'm from the top party in New Zealand. I'm sure Andrew will take notice and he will make note, and you guys will be connected directly that way. So let's make sure that happens. All right.
And Angelo has a direct line to
Andrew.
So,
but he's 100% busy until after our election.
Right. But let's get Geoff and Matt to come to a humanity hang. So the next time Andrew's going to be at a humanity hang, let's make sure we reach out to our friends in New Zealand.
With their election next week, it's more likely that John Oliver will mention their election tonight than Andrew will notice it.
Well, I think we can contact him directly through Humanity Forward. I mean, that's what's running the Humanity Hangs. So, very good. Matthew, you're also running for office at the moment?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, so we'll see how this election pans out, but our party's in it for the long term. I think that's sort of the first thing. We're not really about this sort of 3-year election cycle. We're sort of looking at the structural issues and fixing them and understanding that they're going to take a lot of time. So we're going to be sticking around for as long as it takes to get some sense.
Well, thank you both.
I think everyone who's part of Yang that's like solid, we are in it for the long haul because we have a passion we can't ignore. Like it's like in us, right? Like we have to. There's no other way to say no to it. It's like this is our calling. You have no choice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, well, I'm Faye Koo, and I'm at Palestine Math on Twitter. If you'd like to find me. How about you?
And I'm Faye Doney, the other Faye. And my Twitter handle is Tisdoney, Tisdoney. I'm working on a documentary series right now, and I'm looking for people who are doing creative projects in their own homes and or their communities. And I found a couple already, but yeah, I want to show actionable items that'll inspire other people to like, oh, I never thought of that. So I want to like record that kind of thing. But I'm also looking for people to donate either like resources or money or whatever to help me out because I'm super broke. So yeah, Tisdoney. Now we can pass it to Sam.
How about Ariel?
Yeah, so I'm Ariel. You can find me on Twitter as Ariel's Ariels. That's ARIELS ARIELS. And I also have a YouTube channel, and I'd actually love to invite both of you, Matthew and Geoff. It's called Revolutionary Thinking, and I'll put it in the chat so you guys can all get it. Hang on just a minute here. It's REVOLUTIONARYTHING. And that's it. And I just did a mock debate with Liam O'Mara, who is a pro-UBI candidate running in California. With but his opponent failed to show up to a debate, so we just made one up. So that was one of the last videos. You can go ahead and see that. Yeah. So Ariel's on Twitter and Revolutionary Thinking on YouTube. It was great to talk to you two today.
Okay, and Sheridan.
Thank you.
Sheridan, you're still muted. There you go.
Yes. Thank you for having me on. It was wonderful to talk to you, Geoff and Matthew. I believe I'm following both of you on Twitter, so I'll definitely be following you. You can follow me on Twitter at JSaberGamer, JSABERGAMER. And I actually have a YouTube channel now that I'm doing with my girlfriend. It's just a gaming channel, The Odd Party. So definitely check that out if you want to watch some relaxing gameplay of us.
Sounds like
with
fun.
us. It has been. It has been a lot of fun. But yeah.
Shale?
Thank you. My name is Shale Riley. My Twitter is SHAELRILEY. You can reach me there. Thank you so much for listening, for watching, and thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our guests. This has been a very productive conversation. Very glad to be connected with you, and please feel free to reach out if we can help you with anything. If you need a tweet boosted, if you need to reach some American, just let us know. We'll be happy to help you. So hope to talk to you again.
All Americans know every other American.
Believe it or not, right? We all agree on everything and get along, as you can see.
Yeah, all 300 million, right?
Yeah, Congress isn't deadlocked at all.
We all get together and shake. We just get together and shake guns every now and again. We just walk out into a big field to touch guns and smile. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with this.
That's very nice of you, Shale.
Sounds very American.
Yeah. Now,
we get their user handles.
in all seriousness, thank you for coming on. This is a very good conversation. I learned a lot. We're so similar. It's both encouraging and discouraging, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
This is the foundation of something much bigger. Like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. What's up?
Yeah.
Well, the benefit there is if one of us can solve the problem, then we can look to the other country, which is just the same, and say, hey, look, what are we waiting for?
Yeah,
Right.
it's harder to convince some of our people to take the example of some of the less populous countries. They're just like, well, we're America, we don't listen to anybody. But I mean, maybe if we get it right, someone will have the wisdom to listen to us. But I mean, I don't know. That's a theory. We gotta get it right first. That's a big if.
I'm just ready to move. Whatever. If you guys do it first, great. Like that, and then I'll just have a radio show like beaming in to the United States from there.
Shall we get into the tangent of New Zealand's very generous immigration policies? They do actually have pretty generous immigration policies, you guys. I knew. I'm of that opinion anyway, from what I know.
I'm sure we could continue talking for quite some time because there's so much interesting.
Yeah.
You guys can always come back on, though. Like, this doesn't have to be the first to know late.
No,
thanks for reaching out. Particularly thank Jeremy for reaching out. I know he's gone now, but I really appreciate that.
I'm confused because isn't Jeremy supposed to push the button at the end?
Yeah, he is. He is. Let me just close with a really quick story that speaks well of New Zealand, and also has a very, very tangential connection to Andrew Yang, which is I know some friends who were in a little independent filmmaking group from Buffalo. And like, they were friends with me in college when I was in Oswego. Oswego, New York is kind of close to Buffalo, which is kind of close to Rochester, which is where Andrew Yang, grew up. So it's the same kind of economic area. It's Rust Belt. It used to have industry, and now it has poverty since the industry's been gone since the 90s. So my friends, they all went to college. They all got degrees in different things. None of them used their degrees. Some of them ended up working in warehouses. Some of them ended up working in hospitality. Some of them didn't really have careers at all, and some just sort of fell off the radar. One person in that film troupe, the film troupe fell apart after a few years, but one person who was in the film troupe, he moved to New Zealand. He married a New Zealand woman. He has for sure the highest quality of life of anyone in that entire group from when I knew them, when I was in college around 2003, 2004. So go New Zealand, number one. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Shal.
Thanks for our poor, our refuse, drifting across the ocean.
Anyway,
right.
I would shut the stream off if I had such power, but I don't know. I guess I'm going to just call it.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
I should probably just say goodbye and
yes.
leave.
All right, this will be uploaded.
Goodbye.
Hopefully
have a great time.
Thank you.
See ya.
Have a good day. Stay safe.
Shale. Oops. There goes Shale. I will talk to him later.